So, what makes a Git repository so special? What gives it its powers to move forward, backward in time, track changes, recover files? There's something inside of a Git repository that distinguishes it from a regular folder. Now, our Git demo folder doesn't have that yet, but we're going to set it up. Before we do, though, there are some global things that we need to configure for Git. Before we can make commits to our projects, we have to tell Git who we are. To do that, we're going to use git config -- global, and then we're going to assign a user name, so user.name, and I tend to use the same username that I use on GitHub. And I also use user.email, same thing, and my email is no secret. You might notice in the text that there's an equal sign between the key and the value here, user.name and user.email, and then the value, empty Taggart, and the email address. That's because in the Taggart Institute virtual machine, I am using the fish shell. There are going to be some differences between what you see here and if you're using just regular bash. The equal sign is one of them. Another will be the symbology that you see on the shell prompt that indicates the state of the Git repository. This is, I find, very helpful for working with Git, and you can install these things as well, but I'm going to use them here in this virtual machine. Understand that if you don't have the same setup, there will be a couple of differences. With that out of the way, let's create our first Git repository in this Git demo folder. To do that, we're going to run git init. That by itself would be enough, but we're going to give it an option of -b and main to specify the name of the primary branch. By default, Git uses the term master, which makes a lot of people uncomfortable, and it's really easy to avoid. GitHub itself has moved over to using main, so to have it match, this is the easiest way to do it. You can see right away that not only do I have a notification that I've initialized an empty Git repo, but the symbology on my prompt has changed to indicate that I am in fact in a Git aware folder. What is a Git aware folder? If we run ls-al here inside this folder, you can see I now have this hidden .git directory, inside of which is a whole bunch of stuff. Branches, hooks, info, objects, ref, and then a config file, a description, and a head, whatever that is. The first thing we might want to examine is the config file. For comparison, let's take a look at the config file for our creating with Git repo. It's a whole bunch of other stuff in there, right? So you can see that there are certain things that make a Git repo what it is based on the configuration file itself, including telling any repositories that connect to remote repos how to connect to those remote repos. Feel free to explore the other directories and folders inside of the .git folder. There's a lot that's really interesting in there if you're willing to dive down and uncover it. A little outside the scope of this course since we're focusing on basics. With that in mind, we're going to move on to the next lesson and talk about the Git core loop.